Oh, well.
Yeah.
What psalm are we on, anyway?
I was going to ask
30,
that.
35.
What is 35?
35.
Oh, I thought we did that. I'm ready to do 36.
Well, last week we did 34. And I don't think,
Okay.
I don't think we went on to read 35. Although I don't want to ruin it for tonight, but I'll tell you, this 35 is a tough one to get inspiration out of. So we'll wrestle with it. You know, some of the Psalms are so sweet and so easy in terms of application, but some of them, wow.
Well,
And this 30.
it's amazing every time that it's done at church, they take like 5 verses that are very inspirational.
Right.
And they leave out all the the blood and guts stuff.
Yeah, my favorite one is the one where, you know, the guy's praying that God will smash the head of his enemies' children against the rocks.
I haven't heard that one in church.
Well, you know, the lectionary purposefully cut it out. And then one year I got very brave and I thought, you know what? They're going to hear this. People need to hear that this is in there. So we put it in. It was like, yeah. Oh God, smash the heads of my enemies' children against the rocks.
Wonderful.
Yep,
Oh, wonderful.
yep. The full.
What kind of a reception did church give you for
Well,
that?
you know, people are shocked and they're like, is that really in there? I'm like, yeah, that's really in there, you know? Like,
Open your Bible.
yeah, and, you know, and then of course there are the hardliners who say, well, yeah, we need more of that, you know, we need more of that kind of toughness. We're all a bunch of softies and we don't know how to say the hard words. I'm like, okay.
Oh, gosh.
You go ahead. You go ahead and pray those prayers, but I don't know, maybe as long as you pray it in your prayers, maybe it'll keep you from doing it in life, you know?
Maybe, you never know.
Get it out of your system. Just get it out of your system.
No way, Jose.
All right, so I know Judy is going to come tonight, and I don't know, you know, it's funny, I was thinking about this storm, and right now, on the roof, under this, I mean, it is dramatic out there right now. It is beating down like the original floods have arrived. But I said, you know, can't cancel because I can certainly get here from my house, and you're all in your house, so.
Right.
Yeah, they said after 8 o'clock, you better stay home.
Yep. Well, it's arriving at right about that time, so.
Yeah. What about tomorrow? What do you think?
I don't know. It's going to depend on whether we keep electricity, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
the prediction is that there's going to be massive power outages.
Right.
So if
Wind
yeah,
will pick up. Yeah.
Wind.
yeah, if the power is on, I'll be here. I'll turn on the machine and we can talk about the damage. You know, I'm hoping that won't be the case, but yeah, I don't know. All right, so Barbara, would you like to read, or Debbie, somebody?
Of course, I'll read. Okay, so it's Psalm 35, Prayer for Deliverance from Enemies of David.
Yeah.
Contend, O Lord, with those who contend with me. Fight against those who fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler, and rise up to help me. Draw the spear and javelin against my pursuers. Say to my soul, I am your salvation. Let them be put to shame and dishonor who seek after my life. Let them turn back and confounded who devise evil against me. Let them be like chaff before the wind, with the angel of the Lord driving them on. Let their way be dark and slippery, with the angel of the Lord pursuing them. For without cause they hid their net for me. Without cause they dug a pit for my life. Let ruin come on them unawares, and let the net that they hid ensnare them. Let them fall into it to their ruin. Then my soul shall rejoice in the Lord, exultant in his deliverance. All my bones shall say, O Lord, who is like you? You deliver the weak from those too strong for them, the weak and needy from those who despoil them. Malicious witnesses rise up. They ask me about things I do not know. They repay me evil for good. My soul is forlorn. But as for me, when they were sick, I wore sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with head bowed on my bosom, as though I grieved for a friend or a brother. I went about as one who laments for a mother, bowed down and in mourning. But at my stumbling they gathered in glee. They gathered together against me. Ruffians whom I did not know tore at me without ceasing. They impiously mocked more and more, gnashing at me with their teeth. How long, O Lord, will you look on? Rescue me from their ravages, my life from the lions. Then I will thank you in the great congregation. In the mighty throng, I will praise you. Do not let my treacherous enemies rejoice over me, or those who hate me without cause wink the eye. For they do not speak peace, for they conceive deceitful words against those who are quiet in the land. They open their mouths against me. They say, aha, aha, our eyes have seen it. You have seen, O Lord, do not be silent. O Lord, do not be far from me. Wake up, rouse yourself from my defense, for my cause, my God and my Lord. Vindicate me, O God, Lord, my God, according to your righteousness, and do not let them rejoice over me. Do not let them say to themselves, aha, we have our heart's desire. We have swallowed you up. Let all those who rejoice at my calamity be put to shame and confusion. Let those who exalt themselves against me be clothed with shame and dishonor. Let those who desire my vindication shout for joy and be glad and say evermore, great is the Lord who delights in the welfare of his servant. Then my tongue shall tell of your righteousness and of your praise all day long. Oh boy.
Yeah. Yep. Oh boy.
And this is a peaceful God, right? Be peaceful, God, and whack everyone else.
So there's part of the background that's given for this is that this is not personal, but it's nations, and this lament or this prayer for rescue is related to a treaty that was signed, and the nations signed the treaty together for economic and peaceable purposes, but then several members of the treaty maligned and accused the king, this one that's talking, of violating the treaty and of despoiling the treaty, and so they were orchestrating together to bring down calamity upon the nation that was being accused of being cheating on the treaty. I don't know. By the way, hi Judy, welcome.
Yes, hello. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and we are reading Psalm 35. We just
I have-
read it.
Yep.
It just seems to me, I feel like after I read this afternoon, and I feel like saying that it just always feels like some of these theological reflections only see either or. They only see either or. They either everything is good and God is good, or everything is bad and God needs to be called upon as a warrior to wipe out everybody that's been bad. And even still today, I can feel a nudging in me when I read these texts, because I grew up in a community who agreed with this. They agreed that there really is only, like, either it's good or it's bad. There's no subtlety. And the king is convinced that others have maligned him and have maligned his nation. And he cries out to God to bring upon those people who have maligned him a horrible calamity. You know, let them be destroyed. Let their reputations fall to nothing. And that will bring about what? Justice? Does that make it? I don't know. Does that make it right? And I know my brain is still hardwired to think this way. I'm just saying that as a confession. I still go out into life with a lot of either or thinking. And people are either for me or they're against me, you know, and I'm not proud of it, but this is where it gets rehearsed. You know, it's in these kinds of readings, and sometimes it's in the hymns that we sing, in celebrating God's defense of us, and I don't know, like even Luther's great hymn during the Reformation. What am I trying to think of? Somebody help me out. A mighty fortress is our God. You know, a bulwark never failing. And the language in that hymn, beautiful music, and the language in that hymn is that God will defend us and God will wipe out and destroy everybody who is against us. And in that case, Luther was writing a song about Catholics and the papists, and that the name of Jesus was going to bring the Pope to his knees. And there would be the error of the ways of the Catholics with their candles and their incantations and all these horrible things that were an enemy of the Reformation and of the freedom of God. You know, I don't know. Somebody else say something.
You had said in the beginning you didn't think it was personal. It sure does sound personal to me.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I didn't use the right word. I should have said personally helpful. Helpful personally. You know, last week the psalm I thought was just really, really helpful. In our talk about it, I went home and I felt good. I don't know where you're going to read this and feel, I don't know. There's two parts that are particularly troubling for me, and I can only hear Walter Brueggemann in his teaching on the Old Testament. He's like one of the most profound scholars of the Old Testament, says there is no question that in the theology of the Hebrew Scriptures, there were times where you had to awaken God. You had to wake God up to what was going on in your life and in your world, and you had to stamp on the ground or bang on the walls or something and say, God, are you paying attention here? And yeah, and here it is. It's right here in this psalm. Let's see. Where was it? Do you remember where it was? Did you catch it when we went through? Here, verse 22. You have seen this, God. He's going on about how they opened their mouths against me, and and then 22 he says, you have seen it, O Lord. Don't be silent. O Lord, don't be far from me. And then 23 comes right in. Get awake. Now I'm reading a more literal translation than the King James. But the Hebrew word is, get awake, God, and rise up to my defense, to contend for me. O Lord, my God and my God and my Lord. Wake up, God.
Did it ever occur to David he may have a lot of enemies because of something that he did?
Yeah, I mean, that is never entertained in this text. Clearly he is innocent of violating the treaty. He did not do what he's being accused of. And those people that are saying those things, there's only one reason they're saying it. It's not because he did it. He didn't violate any treaty. But they're saying it because they're malicious, bad people who have in their mind his destruction. I don't know. But evidently God hasn't been paying attention. And David wants God to start paying attention over here.
Maybe God's paying attention and sending a message.
Yeah, what about that?
Doesn't have anything to do with this.
Yeah, what about that? I don't know. And he says, listen, God, if you wake up and you slap these people down, then I'll sing your praises from now till the end of my life. Like, you got to...
Well,
Transactional.
Yeah. Then my tongue shall proclaim your righteousness, nothing but your praise all day long.
this surely doesn't sound like the David in the Quran who could do no wrong. This is a Hebrew David with a lot of faults, and David just doesn't see it.
Yeah,
I guess
he doesn't. And if it's David or if it's another king, I mean, it says, it's a psalm of David, but again, we don't know, is it a psalm to David, from David, about David? We don't know. But even if it's another king, the point is this king is telling a story that we don't have any way to verify. The story that's being told is, I signed a treaty, I worked out arrangements with other nations, and they, not me, have violated those treaties. And in order to justify their behavior, they've turned it around. They're doing that thing that, in particular, one or two famous politicians today are great at, and that is they are accusing the other of the very thing that they're doing. Right? This is a very common thing in our world we live in today. Like
projecting
yes.
what's wrong onto your enemy. This applies, though. We don't have to be a king
No.
to not like the people who stand against us. And I'm sure everybody at some time has caught themselves wishing that God would, bring retribution and, cause harm on the people we don't like. And in that emotional state, you're liable to ask for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's, probably very, very common, I'm sure.
Yeah. I know it's true in my life. I have to admit it. It is. I feel very strongly about the things I get involved in. And when somebody comes against me, when someone comes up against me or the other people that we're working together, I believe I'm on God's side, and they have to be on the other side. So I call on the fires of heaven to come down, and I don't use that language, but that's the sentiment that's in me as a human being. I'm just admitting it. I'm a fighter. I am. I have passion for what I believe in. And I don't always know how to deal with it when, what I expect is going to happen from the other side is they're going to change or they're going to do whatever or come around, and instead they come back at me, and all of a sudden, my reputation is destroyed and I'm accused of bad behavior. I hate that. I really hate that. So sure, I'd like it if God would get involved at that point, smack down my enemies.
I mean, don't we all love to see on the evening news somebody we really dislike finally have an expose, and they get their comeuppance on the TV where everybody can see, and we go, oh yeah, I knew it all along. That guy was horrible.
Right.
We delight in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
But I know, so I can't speak from experience, but I've lived long enough to know there's another way. There is another way. I think about the stories of Nelson Mandela and his incredible embrace of his enemies after he was released from jail. And his refusal to do this bifurcation, this either or, because he believed that would promote war, and that only war would result from that. And so internally, I've watched a couple of biographies of him and stories of his life, and I have to just stand back and be in awe and say, I don't have that in me. I don't, that's not the way. I still watch on television for my enemies to be embarrassed, and I still celebrate when they are.
Mm-hmm. I think Gandhi did the same thing. After the British left, then all of a sudden, the people of India, it was apparent that there were so many different factions that couldn't get together, that there was more violence breaking out after the British left, and Gandhi encouraged them to all work together. At least they did for a while, to have a coalition government where people could work together and not be violent with one another. That doesn't work all the time, and it doesn't work for forever, but it's worth trying. The non-violent way is the third way, right? So
Yeah.
It's the hardest way, though. It seems the hardest way.
Yeah, and I think
it doesn't seem fair, I think also. It's not fair that someone can get away with doing bad stuff. We want to see them punished in some way. And I think that's why people believe in hell.
yes, I do too. Yeah. Yeah, because in this life, there are too many experiences of people who behave really, really badly. And I'm not just talking about serial killers. I'm talking about people that behave badly. They build skyscrapers with defective concrete, and then it falls down and kills people. We long for, we long for an accountability in life that people who do that kind of thing are not going to be able just to take the money from that building and go off into Tahiti and buy a vacation house somewhere. While all the people that were living in those houses, you remember that one condo that collapsed in Florida? It's I don't know. It feels like I guess what I'm saying is I want to get God's telephone number and call and say, excuse me, are you really paying attention here? Because these people are going off scot-free. I don't know. I just...
Well, maybe David has a point.
Maybe he does. I mean, he's David after all. Man after God's own heart, right? That's what they said of him. But then you go to other Psalms and they say things like, the Lord is your keeper. He will not let the sun strike you. The Lord your God does neither slumber nor sleep. God is immediately aware of what's happening in your life. How do you put all that together? How do you bring that together into a consistent voice that's, talks to a Bible class about, how are we supposed to think about life? How are we supposed to think about things like justice? And I don't know. I think of the campaign that the Immokalee workers are involved in. The Wendy's people who just keep thumbing their noses at the kind of accountability and worker protections that they would want for anybody that they knew. And yet, it's like, maybe we don't want to get involved in that. I don't know.
You rationalize that, either that you don't consider those people as being human, or that they don't deserve it, or the greater good to them is what is coming to them.
Yeah. And the stinging part, I'm not sure how much this takes place, but in the narrative, the stinging part is when those people who do that, who take advantage and do all the rest of it, then get strong enough that they release rumors and stories about the people who are trying to get them to change. They start to say terrible things about the Immokalee workers, and they say, well, these people are communists, and these people are, these are just communists trying to bring communism into the southern part of the United States. And it's like...
Okay.
That's like, I keep going back to this effective altruism. The guy who was caught because of the Bitcoins, that's what he preached to Congress about effective altruism. I'm going to make all this money, and then I'm going to be nice and kind and give some to others, but the sum is pretty small. And he not only made a lot of money, he made it by being corrupted and doing things that weren't quite kosher.
Yeah, he drained the savings account and life investments of hundreds of thousands of people, and used it, consumed it. And it was like a little bit like a sophisticated pyramid scam, and just took all the money for himself.
Right.
I mean,
but that's helpful because it was doing good for somebody, right?
Yeah.
That's not him. Well, people who say in terms of the trickle down, I guess I'm thinking of trickle down economics.
Yeah.
Well, we give these people all these jobs to pick our tomatoes, right?
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if you've ever worked for a boss who believed that they had done you a favor by giving you a job.
Right.
But man, there's a bunch of them out there. They
Oh,
really
yeah.
are. And I can just tell you, one of the things that comes to my mind, and sometimes I get tired of talking about it, maybe you get tired of hearing about it, but I came into this presbytery 12 years ago, and I was appalled as I tramped around in the presbytery. I got elected to office, and from inside I began to see corruption. I mean, real corruption that was going on in the church. And that individuals were like using the controls of power of congregations for their own financial gain. And I was so shocked by it, I couldn't even talk about it. And then I began to talk about it, and I filed with 3 other people Sharon Kroll was one of them. We filed basically a church lawsuit against the whole presbytery. And we accused them not only of doing this, they were selling churches that were going out of business, and they were profiting from it. Both the presbytery was profiting, and then there were individuals that were profiting from it. And we rang a bell, we documented it all, and I will tell you, I have never in my life had my reputation attacked and was maligned like I was in response to filing that complaint with the General Assembly. And I, people would stand up in the presbytery and say, it wasn't Christian of me to do this. And I must have something wrong with me because, this isn't how Christians are supposed to behave towards each other. And
You're not part of the old boy network.
Yeah, it was the old boy network.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but who was being unchristian? The people who were defrauding other people, or you pointing it out?
I thought...
Of course, we know, but...
I thought that... And it was funny how the wind changed, because there was one presbytery meeting where, I don't know, there were about 10 or 12 other people who had read the complaint, and they began to demand answers from the people who were in power. They were the ones that were running this scheme, and they began to demand answers, and I thought, okay, fine. So it's going to take a course of its own. And after that presbytery meeting, I and the two other people that were with me, including Sharon, we were demonized. We were accused of being malcontents. I mean, people said, oh, Pastor Lou, he's pastoring that crazy congregation up there. and
the Franklin Lakes congregation has always been known to be the outliers.
That's right. And so, no big surprise, right?
You're just carrying on a tradition.
Yep, that's right.
And rebels with the cause.
Yep.
Exactly.
And there were people in the presbytery meeting who stood up and cried. And they said, there's so much conflict in my life. There's so much disruption. The last thing in the world I need is to come to presbytery and hear fighting and backbiting going on like that. I just can't believe it. And I was like, really? Like, really? That's going to be your response? But, so I guess I didn't awaken God enough, because...
So what was the eventual outcome?
I quit.
But when did
I just threw my hands up. I lost. We lost. They did hear our complaint, and it was adjudicated. But the people, it's like, without going into too much detail, it was the weirdest thing in the world, because we filed the complaint with the Synod, with the judicial, and in order to proceed with the investigation, they sent the complaint to the people who were being accused.
Right.
They sent it to them. And then, and it was so bizarre, because the investigative committee from the Synod arrived to interview myself and two other people. And when I got into that meeting, it was very clear that somebody had convinced this investigative committee that I was a very unhappy person.
You're the malcontent.
I was full of malcontent and disruption. And I will tell you, there was a moment where I felt the saving hand of God's grace fall upon me in that room. And it was, I didn't know any of these people. And they were like talking about me like as if we know what kind of person you are, that kind of stuff. And I said, I'm surprised that you all are coming with that attitude towards me. And I named, some of you may have met Judy Thoreau. Judy was very involved in the Synod. And I said, listen, I just want to ask you a favor. After this meeting is over and you've all convinced that I am a horrible, disruptive person who loves nothing more than, discord, when you go home, you know Judy Thoreau, don't you? And the one woman said, yes, Judy Thoreau and I are very good friends. I said, would you please call her and ask her about me? And she said, well, I'll call her right now. So she got up out of the meeting and she went out in the hallway and she called Judy. And I didn't hear the conversation that went on. But I'm telling you, it was like the hand of God in an intervention. Because she walked back into the room and she said, I think maybe we need to begin again. And the entire direction of the investigative committee was to say, okay, maybe we're not listening to your story. Now, I thought that was the beginning of the change, but that committee put its report together and sent it up to the higher governing body, and the higher governing body edited it down and removed all of the accusations from it. And I'm still thought of. Now the presbytery's moved on, it's merged, there's people involved, whatever. I've let it go. I really have, even though it may not sound like it in my telling of the story. But it was just a real education to me for what it costs sometimes to be that whistleblower, to call out people for their behavior. Especially people who sit in the seat of power and have reputation and have, all kinds of good thoughts that people think about them, and they're untouchable.
Yeah.
It's costly.
I mean, even though it's a part of the church judiciary, it doesn't mean it's not corrupt.
Right.
So whoever thought that? And isn't the endowment just as big nowadays, even when churches are going under and could use a helping hand? Isn't the endowment always the thing? They say we must keep it intact. The principle can't be touched. All this jazz. I mean, yes. Did that ever change?
No, it did not.
So to me, that says a lot right there. Where are you placing your help? Where are you placing your support? With the people, with the individual congregations, or with the bankers? I mean, what's the point of the endowment if it's not spent on the churches that need it? I never understood that.
You're preaching my gospel now.
Well, look at all the colleges and the billions of endowments, and meanwhile, they make people go into debt to get an education. That's capitalism, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I was pastor at the Boundbrook Church for 11 years, and the Boundbrook Church was a really big church, big congregation, and they had a big endowment. I mean, they did. And they owned a cemetery that was worth a fortune. And the cemetery earned all kinds of money. And we would sit down to put a budget together. And I would talk to them about using the money they had to do ministry. To really do ministry. I mean, what? And they would say, well, no, we have to protect the endowment. And I would say to them, I wish the day would come when you would realize that, quote, your money in the bank is the people sitting in the pew. It's people. It's not dollars. It's people. And if we can inspire people, they would say, oh, well, the church is going to die. I go, well, what is your idea of a dead church? Because when I went to that church, it was dead. It had money. It had enough money to sustain itself. I got this one guy to do a projection, and they figured out that if no one gave one single dollar to the church would still be in operation for 20 years.
Oh my!
And yet, it was the topic, always the topic, whenever we had trustee meetings or finance meetings, was always the survival of the church. And, you know, to me, the church, I'm not trying to be simplistic. I know you need money to do things. You do. And there's nothing wrong with investing your money so that it grows and all. I'm with all that. But when you start suffocating the ministry of the church under some misguided idea that you're trying to preserve the church, you're choking it to death. You're killing it. And then it will surely die, even if it can still pay the light bill and everything is there. There are a lot of church museums out there right now. A lot of them. My other favorite story was in the Newark Presbytery. There was a congregation that had shrunk to 5 women. There were just 5 older women in the church, and it had a massive endowment. And so these women came to the presbytery with plans. They were going to put a full-scale elevator in their church. Because,
for 5 people?
For 5 people. Because they were getting old, and they wanted to make sure. The sanctuary was up on the 2nd floor, and they wanted to make sure they were still going to have access. So their proposal, I think it was $200,000. They were going to spend $200,000 to make sure they could still get in the church. I think, well, God bless you. You know? Now that's thinking.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know. Life is really bizarre sometimes. So, I mean, what are we to think? What are we to think? David, the king, I don't know, the nation cries out that someone has maliciously accused them of violating a treaty that they have not violated. And now they pray the fires of heaven will come down on the people who are maligning them.
Oh, it's kind of refreshing though that stuff like this was left in.
Yes, totally.
Because you do have a point of departure where you can talk about maybe we don't want to feel this way. Maybe this is too human. Maybe, we need to, because like you said before, there are many Psalms that are wonderful and lovely and inspiring. And yet when you get this, you got to have a little something to push back on. Otherwise, how relevant is it,
Is it a wake-up call?
Maybe.
Well,
And I'll look in the mirror.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also it allows the scriptures to touch down to the earth.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very real earth life grounding here. This is not some mystical spiritual description. This is how life is. This is how it is, and this is how we respond as human beings. Now, it doesn't say what God does. All it leaves us with is this petition. The king says, hey, God, look, if you come to my aid here, I'll sing your praises for the rest of my life. But the story isn't finished. Is that what happens? I don't know. Does the morning newspaper come out with a headline that reveals that this king who's pleading innocence, not so innocent after all? I don't know. They say where there's smoke, there's fire, right?
I'd like to know whether this was before or after Bathsheba.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to know that about a lot of things that are attributed to David. And
Yeah.
what was Bathsheba's husband's name?
Uriah.
Yeah, I always felt like the common references to that incident in David's life should always have been Uriah instead of Bathsheba.
Uh-huh. Right.
Because Uriah is the one who was murdered.
They both got treated shabbily, though. I mean, poor the two got punished by God, we're told.
Yes.
She had to lose her child just because she succumbed to the king. What was she supposed to do?
Yeah,
Maybe commit
right.
suicide? I don't know.
Yeah, the king who enters her house and uninvited and comes in and says, I can't control myself because you're so beautiful.
Right.
Wow. You can take
Well,
you can take that to the bank. That's most men's justification for all their bad behavior.
Exactly. Well, that's why now if any Muslims are listening, close your ears. But frankly, a lot of the covering of women is so that you don't incite the desire of men, as if men are not able to control themselves
Well, we're
in the
not.
presence of a woman. I don't know. It goes back to that story. Yeah, come on.
Made them do it.
It's your fault if you, I mean, this is common even now. We blame the victim for inciting some kind of horrible response in men. I'm sorry, guys. Really.
It's how
David is all too human in a lot of these stories, and I think that's the point. It speaks to us as humans with many of the same foibles, and if he were perfect, again, what would be the point of this story? We need to learn from his triumphs and his faults.
It's interesting to me. I want to say a couple things in response to what you're saying, because I was raised in a world of men where that is the bottom line, is that if a woman is if you're having a response of attraction to a woman, it's her fault. I mean, it's her fault. She's wearing perfume, maybe it's how she's dressing, I don't know. But
You go to court, they ask,
Yeah.
well, how was she dressed?
Yeah.
What was she doing?
Yeah.
Why was she out at night?
Right, where was she? What
As if you weren't allowed to walk around at night, It's like,
right.
She was looking for it.
Yeah, certain locations signal that it's okay, right? But here's the other thing I want to say about the hijab. The interesting thing about sexual attraction is that less is more.
Yep.
And they know this. The producers of these magazines know this. Now, you wouldn't know it from some magazines of style that reveal everything, but the truth is seduction is actually more powerful when it invites the work of the imagination rather than what is actually seen. And so I think to myself sometimes, I don't live in a culture where the only part of a woman that's ever seen is her eyes. But it makes me wonder, is the rationale any less among men in those cultures that look at whatever is revealed and then through their imagination they go insane, imagining
I
the
still
rest.
think men should be able to control their emotions, no matter what the provocation may or may not be. Come on, guys, can you not control yourselves?
No.
And frankly, I think there's nothing wrong with hijab if you're wearing it for the same reasons as, a Jewish man might wear a yarmulke, or
Right.
it's part of what you want to do and you feel called to do in your faith. But to make it so that you need to be, in charge of men's emotions, no, get lost. I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that making men responsible men can feel whatever they want to feel, but it's when they act on those emotions and then they believe that somehow they're not accountable. I mean, everybody is.
Hijab or no hijab, you're probably going to be attracted to the opposite sex. So have some control over yourself.
Yeah.
That's the point. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway.
That is the point.
That's my rant for tonight.
Well, and I'm trying to remember the road that we went down to get here.
We're off the road.
But, you know,
So it's David. It was David.
yes,
His
that's right. It was
personal
David.
shortcomings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just too much in the scriptures and what's attributed to David that makes David right, that whatever David thinks or feels or does is right. I mean, admittedly, with the death of Uriah, the prophet comes in and accuses him, and he enters into a year of grief because his son then dies. I get it, but to make that somehow a major event in the life of this man, Uriah was a minor part of the number of men living on the earth who died because of King David. Mm-hmm. I mean, this man had a bloodthirst for war and for conquering nations and for wiping out neighbors. And how that man ever becomes the archetype, the highest model of the type of a human being that you want, I will never understand. I won't. His life does not represent much of what the rest of the Bible talks about in terms of what God is like or what God wants from us. It could not be two more opposite pictures in the Bible of King David and Jesus. They are diametrically opposed in everything that they said and did and how they lived and the God that they felt they were following and revealing. Total opposites. And yet, a lot of our Christian liturgy seems to think that they're one and the same.
How'd that happen?
Not really sure, actually. Not really sure, because in order to get there, you have to eliminate all of the Bible that happens after 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles and of Samuel. Because everything after that is about hatred towards kings, and how terrible life becomes under the autocracy and the rule of one. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
It could be a modern lesson, the way things are now.
I was thinking.
Yeah.
It does, it seems to reflect exactly what's going on today. I mean, who's David? We can name him. Who are his acolytes? Who is he? I mean, it's all, they're just in different costumes,
Yep.
and they have names, but the behavior is exactly the same.
Yeah, and it's the belief still that...
Yeah, so what's the learning?
Well, I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
it's to read the Bible is to learn. I mean, in many reasons, but, if you're looking at the question of, what is the learning?
I don't know. I'm not sure, other than the immediate lesson of life, well, okay, I don't want to do that today, but I'm not sure the bigger trends of life become lessons for human beings. We keep repeating over and over and over again the same, we respond to an intuition. You go back to when Samuel was leading the people and they had militias, and the people said, we're tired of being weak nations. We want a king. We're tired of other nations invading us. We're tired of them taking our jobs and our economies. It's the same dialogue. And they go, well, Samuel says, well, what do you think the solution is? And they go, well, the solution is clearly a king. And Samuel says, wait, God is your king. And they go, not so much.
Yeah, and now in the papers, every now and then you see the word king and God associated with that man.
Yeah, because it's as if God wants a king. That's what God wants.
And he's his representative, yeah?
I guess. Or just king. Just, things would be so much better. They'd be so much better. If this cumbersome thing called democracy, if we just never really tried it, you know, what we really need is just a very smart, strong, benevolent leader.
Smart,
Yeah.
you eliminated that man right there, but
Yeah.
And benevolent.
how, what always, makes me scratch my head is how people can read the same scripture and get completely opposite ideas from it. And everyone thinks that they are the one who knows what the scripture means.
And moving into today, read the same facts.
Yep. Yep.
And again, veer to the right or to the left of what they've read or seen or understood. I mean, how can that be?
I don't know. It's a marvel of our human existence. They've been doing it. We've been doing it as human beings since the beginning of time.
That's right.
We look at
And
this.
read it with what we want to say.
Yep. Yes, we do. So I mean,
We don't want a God, we want God to be like us, not
Exactly.
us to be like God.
yeah, and in spite of the fact that the first commandment says, "Don't you do that." No, the very
But that's
first.
saying that's other idols, not
No,
us.
no.
We're exempt from that.
Yeah,
Or
we don't have that problem.
Well, this was a very depressing psalm.
Yeah, I told you. I told you it was gonna be. I told you that.
You warned us, yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up, and I'll say goodnight.
Okay.
And I'm
You
gonna.
can flow home.
You
Be
guys,
careful.
yeah, you guys are in your houses. I'm listening to that rain out there, and I got to figure out how to get in my house without taking a bath. But maybe I'll sleep.
I hope you have an umbrella. It's yeah, it is.
All right, I will see all you good folks the next time. Thank you for being here tonight and for your part in participating and helping to shape whatever it is we did. Good night, everybody. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Take care.